Are you recording?
I am recording. How are you doing, Kristen?
I'm fantastic. Thank you.
Do you highlight your hair?
No.
Really?
No.
This is the Lemon Face Podcast.
Lemon Face.
It's so chaotic. Curiously fresh conversations about the world we live in.
She's a ginger.
Have you played Halo?
No.
With you, yes. Is there a ginger?
In your brother's room.
Did you really, actually?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I don't remember that.
Do you still play Halo? I
Yeah.
see a Halo thing right there.
No.
There's a show called Halo.
I know, it's based off of the game.
Is it good?
I didn't watch it.
Oh.
I thought it was, I don't know, it didn't look very cool. I didn't want it to ruin my views of Halo, so.
Well, we would like you to talk about dead people.
Okay.
What is that movie called?
What?
Silence.
Is that what it's called?
No.
No, it's not called Silence.
Killers of the Lamb.
No. It's with Bruce Willis.
I
What's
don't
his
know
name?
what you're talking about.
Okay.
I've never seen a horror movie.
I saw The Conjuring with my eyes closed.
That's really an experience, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. I will never do it again. Also, I saw Woman in Black 2 on Logan and I's first date, and we were both trying to, act like we were cool. So I don't know why we did that, but anyway, here we are today.
He's so cool.
3 kids later, obviously it worked.
No, I've gotten really sensitive to things. I can't watch.
Me too. It's part of
Yeah.
why I quit my job.
You've gone through some suffering, like one that I remember. What were we in 6th grade when your house burned down?
Yeah, so it was Thanksgiving Day, which is crazy, and I was my parents are divorced, and we were having Thanksgiving at my mom's house, and all of a sudden my phone rings, and I get a call from my dad, who was going to be coming over to the house later, and he's just like hysterical, and he just says, "Kristen, the house is on fire. The house is on fire," and then the line goes dead. You know, I go outside, and I just see probably like a 5-mile black pillar of smoke from
your mom's house.
From my mom's house. And
30 minutes away?
Yeah. So that was my dad's house burning. And so, of course, we rush in the car. We get there, and you couldn't stand more than, 100 yards because it was so hot. You couldn't stand there because it was just like a inferno.
Wow.
So I didn't know. We thought at that point that my dad was still inside. We had 4 animals. We didn't know where they were. What actually happened was there's this boiler at the bottom, in our basement of our house, and you're supposed to have this mixture in it, and it's supposed to be diluted with a lot of water. Well, the mixture wasn't. It was highly flammable, almost all alcohol. So he spilt a little bit, and then the pilot light underneath the boiler ignited that. And then he went upstairs prior to it igniting to wipe it up, and he came back downstairs, and he got pushed back from this massive fireball because there was
Explosion?
there was all these vats of this mixture down there.
Whoa.
So it's basically just like a bomb, basically. So he got knocked back. He quickly let my 2 dogs out into the backyard. Went upstairs, and the whole thing was engulfed in 3 minutes. So
The whole house was engulfed?
The whole house. Yeah. He went upstairs, and basically got my cats. He put one in a suitcase, filled it with pillows, chucked it off the balcony to save it, and then he could hear my kitten at the time crying in my room, but there was a huge wall of fire between him and the cat. And he's like, well, if I don't make it, I want to at least try to save Kristen's cat. So he grabbed the attic little string and pulled it, and so all the fire and smoke just for a split second went up, and he ran across, but there was still fire, so he caught on fire. He grabbed the cat, ran back because that's where the balcony was to get off the house. And then that's when he called me. So he got himself, out, went on the roof. He called 911. The roof was very unstable. So he basically tried to call me, but then like dropped his phone. So he thought it was like the Lord or just a voice saying like, get off the balcony. Because he got off, went onto the roof. All of it was unstable, but then right after that, the balcony collapsed. So he got onto the roof. He could hear the sirens, and he basically was like, I have to jump off this roof or I'm going to die. So a couple weeks prior, I taught him how to do a shoulder roll because of martial arts, which is pretty funny that, you know, was such a helpful thing.
You're a how many degree black belt in karate?
3rd degree.
Okay.
So I've been doing that since I was like born, basically. Just kidding. I was 5. But yeah, so he jumped off the roof, did a shoulder roll with the cat, and he hurt his shoulder, and that's when fire and rescue came. He's like, no, I'm fine. And they're like, you're not fine. They brought him into the ambulance, and that's when they realized like he had severe smoke inhalation. So like, you know, the show This Is Us, like how Jack dies. We're basically such severe smoke inhalation, but it's silent. You don't see it, and then your body all of a sudden shuts down because of the lack of oxygen. That's what he had, but they caught it. But once we had gotten to the hospital, he was like in a stable state, and then he just had to really like go easy with like breathing, and he had like a harsh cough for a while. People have said to me, oh, you know, that's such a traumatic thing. And yes, it was traumatic, but it'd be way more like difficult and hard to talk about, like if my dad had actually died. But like stuff can be replaced. You know, insurance, we rebuilt the house, a totally different house, but in the same location. And what's so cool about like the material aspect is like when we went back in the house, like my room was like totally destroyed, like except my Bible. And it was like out in the open, and I still have it to this day. And I learned from that point on, like, stuff doesn't matter.
So cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've been close to seeing death. Like you went to Arapahoe High School during the shooting.
Yeah. Yeah, that was it's crazy. Like, my husband is like, you've been in such, like, crazy, atypical situations that most people, like, live their whole life without ever being involved in. And, so when I was a senior, there was a shooting at my high school, and Claire Davis was one of the students. She was an acquaintance of mine. She was shot that day, and she died later on in the hospital. And the shooter also was a senior, and he was in one of my classes. Like, I knew him semi-well, and it was just really shocking that somebody would do that. But the day of, like, was really scary. We basically heard what sounded like a big textbook dropping, and my teacher went out the door to check, and then there was like 5 more in succession. So then all of us, we were one of the closest classrooms to where he entered the school. And basically, long story short, is it was immediately clear that there was a person in our school with a gun, and they were very close. So you think about like worst nightmare. And so we all huddled in the corner, and we're just praying. One of my friends wrote, "I love you, Mom," on their arm, because they wanted her to know that they were thinking about her when they died, if they found them. And so just really scary for 17, 18-year-old kids to have to process. And I had some PTSD after that, for sure. I couldn't hear like loud noises, or there's a song on the radio at the time that had like kind of fake gunshots in it, and I wasn't able to handle that. I'd have to pull over, or I was in Hobby Lobby, and there was a little kid with this like toy gun, and he jokingly was like pointing it and like making noises, and I like had a miniature like panic attack, which is interesting because I'm not somebody that's, you know, it's atypical of me to react that way. I'm very calm, don't have anxiety. So that was just a whole lot of scary, but there was so much I learned from that too, because I was through like the house fire, and then, you know, the shooting. People didn't really, a lot of people, most people I would say, like didn't really hold my heart well. And so that's where I became really passionate about like holding other people's hearts well. in suffering, in difficulty. And one aspect of that is like not trying to make it better. Right? Everybody, but you didn't die. Oh, but you didn't. Oh, God has it's like, yes, all of those things are true, but like validating somebody when they're struggling and encouraging them and how proud you are of them and what they're doing well, that's like salve to a wound. Like, I am so proud of you for how you're navigating this really difficult situation, and it's just inspiring to me. Like, I just want to sit here and be with you and validate the hard things you're going through versus trying to just stick a Band-Aid on it and make it better.
I have one question before feel like that segues a lot into your job as a victim's advocate. Is that what the job title is?
Yeah, like victim advocate, crime victim advocate.
Yeah. That segues really well. But one question I want to ask first is, you were at Arapahoe High School, which is a secular high school. It's a public high school.
Yep.
And you said that during the shooting, everybody was praying. Mm-hmm. Was everybody praying, or just the people who were religious or had a faith?
No. So, which was really sweet, there's two things about that. So when we were in the classroom, right, we're just hearing gunshots go off outside of, maybe 15, 20 feet. So we don't know if they're going to barge in at any time. And a lot of the boys, which is very interesting, boys who prior I was like kind of annoyed by because they were just like jocks and really cocky. And all the boys stood up and like linked arms around the girls and our teacher. And our teacher even said, like, I'm not going to stand behind you. And she would not, and they were, like, arguing with her. Like, if they come in, like, we want to be the first line. And so that aspect of it was so sweet of, like, here's these boys. And when it really counted, their character showed. Like, the other stuff was all a facade. But when it really mattered, like, that's who they were.
They were men.
They were men, yeah. And that was a really sweet thing. And, yeah, all of us were praying. Because I think when you face death like that, when you know that there's nothing after, that's not very comforting. Like, when you really think that you are going to die, there's not there's no God and it's fine. My truth is my truth. It's like, no, when you feel that way, you want it to continue. And I think that was a huge comfort for me, even though I was scared to death, is like, I really knew like where I was going. And I believed in that wholeheartedly. And I think the people who maybe didn't, they were intensely contemplating that reality.
What did you take with you as like a tool for victims advocacy? Did you have a moment where you talked with someone and there's an example of like someone that you talked to benefited from the experience that you'd gone through?
Could you first go into what victims advocate is?
Yeah.
And how you came across that at Arapahoe County Sheriff's Department?
Yeah, so
how you got into that job?
I'll kind of backpack
history first. Yeah.
Off of both. Yeah, so I started volunteering at the sheriff's office as a volunteer advocate, where basically I would take shifts from 5:30 p.m. to 5:30 a.m. So, and then within any time, dispatch 911 would call me, and I would respond on scene to really severe violent crimes and or traumatic death, or natural death. So then I would show up and I would speak to the family, whoever was surrounded or impacted by the death of that person, and or if it was a crime, whoever was the victim of that crime. So a lot of like domestic violence, like second degree assault, I would meet them at the hospital, where I would just sit with them. I would connect them to resources to help them pass outside of the situation. And why I was on scene, like if it was a death, I would also mitigate any further traumatization. So, for example, when you are at a scene like that and somebody's died, obviously the person is still there. So
The person who has died is
still there. Yeah. So there's, crime scene investigation always comes over just to, make sure that it is what they think it is. And they would, there's clicking of a camera, there's flash, right? They have to move the body. There's just like a lot of traumatic stuff. Then they put them like in a body bag. And so I would be the kind of liaison to be like, hey guys, let's go talk in the kitchen because they're going to be doing some stuff over here. And I just want you guys to be able to spend time with one another. And then once we're able to say goodbye, we'll chat about what next steps look like. So I'd walk them through like the death process, while also trying to minimize further trauma. Like hearing your loved one being zipped up in a body bag, that can be a sound that whenever you hear a zipper on a hoodie or you hear like the ch-ch on a camera, you can go right back to that moment. So I'm obviously there to just console them and be present with them, but then also give them information on what the next steps are going to look like. And that's very different based off of each individual scene. And then for crime, I basically allow and give I allow the victim to know what their rights are under Colorado law, being a victim of a crime. That's kind of the job. And Maya, what was your question?
When was a moment that you used your experience that helped connect with someone?
Yeah, one thing that I can think of is there was a gunshot suicide, which, kind of trigger warning. Obviously, that's a really gruesome situation, and it was this gentleman's girlfriend, and he left. They got into kind of an argument. He went to cool off, came back, and she had taken her own life with a gun. And so he saw that. It was very traumatic, and he was so beside himself. He couldn't speak. He was crying so hard for hours. And oftentimes I'm at a scene for like an hour or like 5. It just depends. So, but this situation, he didn't say anything. I sat with him for 3-4 hours, right, in the silence. And a presence of somebody just being there, right, just like a physical like hand on the knee, like, I'm so sorry. This is so awful. I'm so sorry you had to see that and go through that. The only thing that will bring healing is like time and processing it oftentimes with like a professional. That's why therapists are such good listeners, right? They'll listen and then they'll ask questions.
Once you leave, what do people who have lost loved ones do? Do you know?
Yeah, so we connect them to a lot of resources. So like mental health, grief counselors, we give them this book that has a ton of resources in it, ranging from mental health to childcare to funeral homes, basically an A to Z on everything. It's called a grief book. So we give them our business card so they can call the sheriff's office at any time to figure out how to navigate, and we help them navigate like the next steps if they're kind of stuck.
So after a crime or a traumatic death has happened, how does that crime scene or that gruesome scene get cleaned up? Yeah,
so what's unfortunate is crime shows have made us believe, right, that like you see the person and they're there and it's gruesome and then it flips to the next scene, and that a lot of people think that like the government or the state agency is responsible for the cleanup of that, but that's not true. It actually falls on the family unless it is a crime. So if it's a homicide, the state will pay to have that cleaned up because that person was was a victim of a crime. But if it's a suicide or an overdose in the state of Colorado, right, the family is responsible for the cleanup of that scene. So in that death book, there's also a ton of what we call crime scene cleanup. It can be just hiring somebody to clean up the aftermath of a situation like that. Really terrible. I love the fact that I get to be that person that connects and validates and uplifts victims and people who've seen traumatic things.
What are attributes about yourself that led you to be able to take on that kind of job?
I don't know. I'll kind of give the answer that my husband gave. He's like, you know, you're wired to where you're not so sensitive that like you just take on everybody's pain, but you're not but he's like, you're also deeply compassionate. Now there've been calls that like have stuck with me and that I have had to really process, but for the most part, I think being able to hold those in like a tension that's healthy would be a defining aspect of a victim advocate in general, but me specifically. I mean, obviously homicide is terrible. I've gone to a few, but one was a domestic violence homicide, which was very sad, where basically one partner came and was vindictive and shot and killed the other partner in the driveway of like a really nice neighborhood. So everybody saw it, neighbors saw it, like the partner was still on the driveway when we showed up, like blood. I mean, like really terrible. There were kids involved who were not on the scene at the time. And so us as a team, as victim advocates, like, okay, notifying the family. So homicides are just really tricky because a lot of times individuals are very blindsided. Suicide is also very hard because it's complicated because they chose that route. And so a lot of individuals will feel anger. Everybody deals with trauma and reacts so differently to trauma. It's just mind-blowing. Like some people have yelled at me. Some people just will sob and hug me. I had an older lady and her husband died of natural causes. I mean, he had a heart attack, but he was really old. And for 3 hours, you know, she was a believer. She told me their love story about their children, showed me pictures of, and she was all alone. It was just her and her husband. Like they were just deeply in love. And when they went to release his body, it was raining. It was just me, her, and an officer, or a deputy rather. And he was a veteran, so they wrapped his body in an American flag. And she's like, can I just pray over him? So she went into the garage, set her hand on him, and like prayed. And so there's like pouring down rain. She's praying over him, wrapped in an American flag. And like to this day, that's still like one of the calls. Like if I think about too hard, I'll get like choked up about. I just felt like so honored to just even be there for that moment because it was so intimate. So
What is something we don't know about law enforcement that we should be so grateful for?
Every single deputy that I've ever met deeply cares about doing good. Like, nobody signs up to be a deputy or in law enforcement to hurt people. I think maybe I've never met one. I think there might be some bad apples out there, but they're not just like a bunch of power tripping, you know, inappropriately not informed individuals. Like they deeply care about protecting others. Like I think it's a profession you don't just get into because you want to harm the public. And unfortunately, I think that narrative has caused a lot of good deputies and law enforcement officers to leave because they're tired of being treated that way. Now, in the county that we're in, everybody's pretty respectful of law enforcement, but I know that's not the case everywhere. I will say, though, I think law enforcement in general does need to take advantage of like the mental health counseling that they're afforded. Most agencies will give mental health counseling and like scene processing to officers and deputies. And I do think there's still some stigma of like, oh, if I get help, then I'm going to be viewed as weak. No?
When it comes to cops, what I might cut this question out, but at least find the content.
Just do what are you curious about?
Not yet. No, we have to transition out of it. It's too abrupt.
I was just basically saying like they're not all racist pigs, so.
Yeah, we have to transit. We can't go from that to like
maybe.
I love butterflies. Like you just can't do that.
I'm curious about waterfalls.
Like it just doesn't work.
Have you ever thought about how water just drips That was your thing, you remember?
No.
Like, Kristen, yeah, when we were like in middle school, and you're like, Kristen, do you ever just think about like how water drips? And I was like, literally never. That would only be a Kari. That's why I love you.
Wait, did Kari wear Crocs when you were in middle school? Or was she getting more into the cool
No,
zone?
I wore Rocket Dogs. Remember Rocket Dogs?
Oh, yeah.
I wore Rocket Dogs and Converse and Nike Shocks.
Nike Shocks. Dude, I had like 2 pairs of those, and I thought I was a baller when I walked around wearing them. That was
I
just
loved
like such a...
In middle school, you had pleated pants. Do you remember that? Your pants were pleated. It was great.
I don't...
No.
No,
Oh,
I
it's
don't
so-
remember that. It's probably my mom. Let's be honest. I wanted to wear Spider-Man shirts, and she was like, all right, this is a happy medium.
Okay, here's the question.
Okay.
What what is wait, I have to phrase it.
Just keep talking. Say it again and again and again, and I'll cut it out until you say it again.
What are you curious about in the world?
Oh, man. I am curious about people. I think that's my heart for people who have experienced grief and trauma is you can move past this. It's not who you are. It's just something that you've had happen or experienced to you, but don't let it own you.
I see that you've really done that in your life, and you face
Thank
some
you.
crazy things, but you are a very strong person.
Well, thank
So-
you. It's
I second that.
Well, thanks for being on the pod, Kristen.
No, thank you guys for having me. I think this idea is so cool, and I hope that it continues to grow and you just get a bunch of cool, interesting folks on here to talk about what they're curious about. Speaking of which, duty calls.